Hey there, welcome to LifeDesign Plus, where we are mastering the art of living your authentic life. I want to introduce you to a new show that we're going to have on the podcast. I'm pulling it over from my other podcast, All About Your Benjamins, which is basically going to go into archives. It'll still be there, but this is a special episode, or a special show, I should say, that my dad and I started over in All About Your Benjamins. My dad retired about 3 years ago, and I thought it would be fun to have him share some of his perspective, talk about going into this new phase of life he calls his encore, and have a show together as father-son. Partly for myself to have these documented conversations, because we know we don't all live forever. Also for future generations to not only see me, but see my father and get to hear some of those words. But what I learned very quickly over on All About Your Benjamins is everybody loves my dad, and that the episodes with him are the ones that get the most downloads. So we got back to recording. I think we're gonna have a monthly cadence going forward, but we recorded yesterday. And as I was sitting there in Pursuit Studios, recording the episode, I thought to myself, this conversation is better suited for LifeDesign Plus, because it brings a different perspective to finding and living your authentic life. My dad is in retirement phase, 3 years in, working through the corporate life and the things that happened, the things that didn't happen, and finding out what does this new authentic life look like while he's in retirement. So I was sitting there thinking of I'm going to move this podcast to LifeDesign Plus. It'll be another quote-unquote show, if you will, and we'll just have these conversations regularly and put them over here on this podcast. So this is what we call the next episode. Maybe we'll change the name to make it more in line with LifeDesign Plus, but I think we just carry the name forward because truthfully, the name isn't that important. It's more about the conversation and the content. I love doing this with my dad. You'll see his notes. He prepares for these podcasts. Me, on the other hand, I just show up and take what he says and have some comments. Fun to go back and forth, and you can see the good relationship that we have, and him trying to joke with me and me joking back with him. So welcome to the next episode, a new show on the LifeDesign Plus podcast channel, if you will, and this will probably have a monthly cadence. I'll figure out exactly where it's going to be so you know when to tune in to hear from my dad. But to make it easier, you probably should just subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, and that way when it drops, you'll be notified and you won't miss an episode. Chances are these will be right up there with the guests I have, and my solo episodes will fall down as far as the downloads and the listens, which is perfectly okay for me because I'm excited for my dad to have this outlet and see how happy it makes him to do this. So welcome to the next episode, a new show on LifeDesign Plus. Thank you for joining me on my pursuit. It's an honor to be a part of yours, and we'll go ahead and keep on pursuing with my dad.
All right. Good afternoon, Jay. Good, man. Good to be with you. And for the recording of the next episode, we've had a bit of a hiatus, so it's been a minute or six or whatever it's been. But good to be here. For those of you that may have watched some of our previous episodes, you'll notice a little difference in the studio here. Jay is moving up in the world of his podcast recordings and is now putting together his own recording studio, rather doing it out of his office. He's just now getting there, so a lot of things still not up on the walls, but you can see he's got a couple nice chairs that he picked up, I think, from the curb or Goodwill or somewhere. But anyhow, he's doing a lot of great things, and he's got a new concept that he's moving himself into the future for RLS Wealth and himself called LifeDesign Plus, which is he's already recorded a couple of those, so I'm plugging that for you, Jay. And as always in the notes, you put the link for people to get there, because you've had a couple really great first episodes of your LifeDesign Plus, so I think it's imperative that people get to know about that. So as we're starting this, and it just now hit me, this is our 13th episode.
Lucky number 13.
There it is. So not to spend much of our time on conspiracy theory for the Super Bowl, but 13 had a lot of significance for some silly reason in this year's Super Bowl. So I don't want to get into it, but I just now saw 13 and went that way. But just to stay on that, it's funny because last night on Jimmy Fallon, he talked about Super Bowl, 58, right? Mm-hmm. So 58, 5 plus 8 was 13. And then your Uncle Moon, only as your Uncle Moon can do, said that Chiefs were down by 10. They won by 3. 10 plus 3 is 13. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. You talk about, the universe and things being all out there. So maybe there's some truth to the conspiracy theory on this year's Super Bowl. I don't know.
I think that numerology might be a bit of a stretch.
I think so. But it's just a little bit of fun to start us off here this afternoon. And although I'll just point to one thing I noticed, that during the game, the individual was not wearing the Kansas City Chief jacket that she's kind of made famous. So they were down. Then the next thing I know, she had the jacket on. So being, a sports player, we all have superstitions and things we wear don't change. So as soon as she put that jacket on, momentum seemed to change. So again, not to spend much time on it, but just funny. And why I kind of led with that, again, it just struck me that this being our 13th episode, but it's been fun knowing that, geez, we've been at this for a little while. So when I started to think about this one, I thought, well, you've got me started writing some articles on my own blog, and the 17th article I wrote, I addressed something that I was looking at as kind of two lives. There's been a statement that we live two lives. The first that we learn by, and then the second that we live by. When I always have heard that and read that throughout the years, that statement, and when I was reading it and preparing that article, it made me think a bit harder on that, and not to spend a lot of time on it, but that'll be our theme this afternoon, about the two lives. Specifically that, obviously for me, I'm starting my encore, so it is in some way starting a new life and living a life from where I came from, which was, my work life. But for me, it was more a matter of, when you read that statement, literally, it's like it makes you think that you're living one life, then you stop, and then you start a new one. And I don't know that you think of it that way. I certainly don't. I mean, I still look at it as a continuing journey, right? We talk about that, and we have addressed it, where, yes, I think we still learn, and then we should make adjustments in what we do in our transitions, whether to a new job, new career, or in my case, a new life in this encore phase of our life. But I'm just curious your thought on that. When you hear someone say two lives, is it really you've learned to a point and you stop and you take what you've learned and you move on, or are you somewhat along the same wavelength as me, is that it just kind of keeps rolling and you keep learning from your experiences? What do you think?
I think it is more of an evolution, but I think you could view it as a second life. If you tell yourself that this is your second chance or a second life, and it gives you new perspective, and you're more optimistic about it, then by all means call it a second life. But I think of it as an evolution. Again, you said learning from the experiences, building upon those things. But when you sent that over, I initially saw it. It made me think of another quote from Confucius. We have two lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one. And I like that quote. It's not the same, but it's still kind of connected. I like that one because in that quote, I almost think of it as two lives. You're living this life, and then when you realize you only have one life, whether that be a health scare or you see somebody else go through a health scare, you change, and then you actually really start to live. So there's like this first life, which is just going through the motions, letting other people dictate what it is that you're going to do. And then hopefully you reach a point where you take control, and now you realize, oh, I only have one life. Now I'm actually going to live. Yeah. So I almost think of the Confucius one. I think there are two lives, but the one that you had, I think, is more of an evolution.
Yeah, I think that's true. And as I'm learning more and more, as I'm now moving into, this is the start of my third year of the encore phase, that it is still continuing to be that journey. I mean, and admittedly, I've learned, a lot more about myself in these past 3 years. And I attribute part of that to the fact that I'm no longer living, if you would, that first life, that work life, right? Which also included, the family with you and Kristen. So as we go through that, we'll say that part of life where we're doing everything that we can to discover who we are, some of that definition is by what we thought we wanted to be and the life that we were achieving to live. That somewhat is driven by, as you said, experiences during that phase of our life. But for me, in that first part of the life cycle, my journey was trying to learn and grow and live the life I thought I wanted to give, which I believe that I did, because I look at Mom, I look at you, I look at Kristen, and I go, okay, life was pretty darn good. And we had a few good bumps along the way. We got through those. We made some adjustments. I made some adjustments to career moves. But I also look at that as that part of life is even though we lived it for a lot of different reasons. One is because we lived a life that was the only one we knew, right? As you and I spoke before, I came up from, small steel town. My dad had the grocery store. Everybody worked the mill. I went to college. Mom and I, married. We moved out here. Life, and here we are, present day, and all the good that happened in between. But I also look at it in thinking about this phase as that journey. I'm with you. It is a continuous journey, but it is also a journey that you evolve in, and you should as an individual, because we've spoke to the fact that, hell, I can live another 30 years given bloodline and heredity and all that we know about our families, unless something's lurking around inside that I don't know about and life changes, but we don't worry about that. It also seems that I also feel that we're a part of that journey because we had to live that part of our life in order to get to where we're at, right? I mean, it's like you go through life. Sometimes you're just going through the motions. Sometimes you're living it. You make your adjustments, as you said, obstacles. But I also think that's an important part of life that we have to recognize that we had to go through to get to where we're at. And I think you and your buddy Tyrone Ross addressed that in your most recent episode of LifeDesign Plus, right? You and Tyrone talked about, you got to live this life. You got to take this journey. You make the steps. You make the mistakes. You learn by them, and you go on. So I think that's important as well, right, Jay? I mean, to recognize that you had to take the journey. Same thing with you. I think you had to go the journey you did as well to get where you're at today. And without some of that journey, without some of those episodes in your life, maybe you wouldn't have made certain decisions. I don't know. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's truth. I also wonder if there were like signs along the way that I wasn't picking up on because I wasn't aware that would have got me here sooner. So I don't remember where I heard this, but basically like the saying or the idea was the universe is going to teach you a lesson, and it's going to keep on teaching you the lesson until you learn it. So that's why sometimes if it seems like people always have the same things happen to them over and over and over, it's because there's a lesson to be learned and you're not learning it. So the universe is going to keep on trying to teach you until you learn it. So I wonder if there were opportunities for me to get on this path way before, but I didn't have the alignment that I have today to be able to recognize it, to understand it, to pick it up, because I was trying to figure things out. So yes, I think you're right. I think it had to go through all those experiences to get here. I just wonder if my road could have been shorter had I known that that's a possibility, which is like why I want to talk about this stuff. I want people to realize that, hey, you do have more control over your life and your thoughts do create your reality, and pay more attention to these signs because maybe you can pick up on it 10 years earlier and you get 10 more years of walking in your authentic life, doing what you're supposed to do rather than waiting and have it delayed.
I think it's a very good point because that's what I'm beginning to feel as well. I don't feel disappointed about anything that the way my life has gone. I do believe and always believe that everything that has gone on, the journey that we have taken, the life Mom and I have had, the way we were with you and Kristen, and I mean, a lot of that was just because we wanted to do better, and our life focused on you and Kristen, and giving you, and working that, and making sure that we were all about that. And then when you both got, much older, got through college, set your own life, then I was still trying to at that point saying, okay, now I can focus a little bit more on me without recognizing it. I think you're right. There are signs along the way, but I think you have addressed this as well, that we don't really know what those signs are. I think that's the challenge. I mean, even for myself now in this phase of life, I know that I can have another lifetime ahead, right? But as I'm going through the day, I mean, what are the signs? And I think that's a lesson we have to try to learn. And maybe to your point, if things keep hitting you in the head, or you have that repetition going on in your life about certain things, to learn to do that and have, I think, maybe new habits. I think to the books, The Alchemist with Santiago and his journey, right? I mean, that whole process was him taking the journey and finding out about himself, going for the riches, the people he met along the way, right? We meet people along the way. I think it's learning through others' examples as part of those signs that we get, right? So he had to learn those things. And likewise, the other book that I read called Mount of Olives, where Felix, again, very similar to Santiago, he has this journey going to look for a treasure, and he meets certain people along the way, and he learns lessons. And I think the lessons part of it is those examples that get us to where we need to be. That's why I think now in this phase of my life, the lessons are a little easier to accept because I see them more on our time rather than me trying to figure it out in between of what I've got to do at work, at the office, raising children and where those priorities are at. So this phase of our life, when we're in this encore phase of life, it's time for us to relax, right? Because they talk about retirement being a time of relaxation and leisure. And although I think that's very true, I also feel that I need to caution myself and caution others to say, I don't think it's a time to be very relaxed and a lot of leisure. First of all, we live in a very different world than what I thought my life would be at this point in time. I was still expecting the world to be much of what I envisioned it to be, but again, so much of out of our control. So you got to be more on guard. I think the leisure part for me, and for those out there thinking about this phase of life, the leisure point of time now is, it's your time. So you get to do things on your time. So to me, that brings a lot of relaxation and leisure. I'm no longer looking to conquer the world. I'm just looking to conquer our life. And so I think that's very critical. And in the book, The Mount of the Olives, there's a quote, and I wrote it down so I don't forget it here. And I think it fits in where it says, "Your life today reflects much of the habits you have created. Do not take this lightly." And when I think of that quote, it fits to what we've been talking about, right? I mean, so much of your life is the habit you've created that keeps you on a certain path and maybe stop you from seeing something in front of you. Or is it that it really is obvious and you're just electing not to?
Or the habits could be leading you exactly where you want it to be, too.
Right.
Your habits don't always have to take you away. Your habits can take you to where you want to go, which I think if you know where you want to go, then you can reverse engineer the habits that will get you there.
Right. So back to that point of we have to take this journey, and this journey that we're on is, some divine purpose that's put us on this journey to take us to do what we need to do. People that come in and out of our lives for different reasons, people that we've helped have come in and out of our lives. I think that's all part of the plan, whatever the master plan is of who we want to be, right? So I think our decisions are made throughout life for reasons at that specific point in time, right? Just like those of you still working your career and in certain phases of life worrying about a transition to something new or to take that step out like you did when you did, to make that change from being, corporate driven to being where you wanted to be. I think you started that sooner in your thought process, because I remember back to when you were in the corporate part of the finance world and you always knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur and be independent. And I remember once having lunch and we talked about it and you said, well, I think in 5 years I'll make that. Well, you certainly made that jump sooner than 5 years. And obviously there was an event that happened that I think caused you to push it to start early. So again, did that event really cause you to do it, or was that the need of that event to make you do it?
I've realized and experienced that whenever I set my intention on something that I really want, not just an idea, like if it's something that I really want and I put a date on it, it will always happen faster than I thought it would. And I think that's part of like the universe bringing to us what we want. When you have the intention, you know that you want it, you're convicted in it, you're already planning it, you're already taking all the steps, and then, luck would bring it to you. But it doesn't always bring it in a way that you would want it. So, basically being forced out at the last firm made me start sooner than I would have. But it was a blessing because I was already ready. Like I had everything planned to launch Arlos Wealth except for the company name. And it took the tough conversation that I had to initiate off of my plate because I don't like tough conversations, and it forced me to go do it. Otherwise, I would have found reasons to push back, and wait longer and remain somewhere that I wasn't supposed to be. But since I had planned everything, spent late nights planning the game plan, figured out what things were going to be, knew the technology I was going to use, like I was doing everything I needed to do, prepare for it. And so then the universe is like, all right, if that's what you want, we're going to give it to you. We're going to give it to you and have a little fun by making it, not the way you thought it was going to be, and a way that also challenged whether or not I really wanted it, because a lot of people in that situation would have got scared and would have gone to another company for the safety of it, where I said, all right, this is what I wanted anyway, so it brought it to me.
Yep.
And same thing when I was at OnRamp. And, I had a conversation with Tyrone in November and said, look, man, like I'm doing too much. I got to leave. I want to finish things out. And I remember dreading that conversation with him, knowing he wouldn't be mad at me, but not wanting to let your friend down. And then once I had that conversation, I was like, I wish I would have told him I was done next month. And then instead of waiting till April when I was going to leave, things sped up and I was out beginning of February. So like, when you know what you want and you want it really bad, like that's the law of attraction.
Right.
And it's a difference between saying you want something, saying it versus saying you want it and then internally really wanting it and then doing things to move towards it. Like you've got to do both. So I don't remember why I went down that tangent, but that's what your comment led me down to.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's critical. Much to our conversation, right? Why did we go down this road, or how did it take that tangent? It was that thought, it was that moment, and a decision made based on our current conversation to go this way, but illustrates once again that it's not necessarily a random occurrence. Mm-hmm. I think what I'm experiencing is that as this journey continues, and I'm taking the experiences, and some of them have been very positive and such, that it's caused us to make those decisions. Mm-hmm. So once again, back to, we have to be on this journey to get to where we are. And I think in some ways, the person that we are today is because of the decisions we made prior, not necessarily right now. I mean, the person I am today, honestly, Jay, I can say is much the person I thought I would be at this point in life, because my definition of and where I wanted to be has always been where Mom and I are right now. Mm-hmm. I will admit, likewise, as you well know, yes, there were decisions I wish I didn't make, or decisions I wish I would have made, and who knows how those would have turned out. Mm-hmm. But I don't think you spend much time worrying about that, because, yes, maybe those decisions would have taken us somewhere else, or would have been but how would that have made our life? Mm-hmm. Again, we don't know, because we haven't lived it, and we wouldn't know. Mm-hmm. But I think the happiness comes from being content with yourself, decisions made, and the impact you have on individuals' lives. Mm-hmm. And I think we've benefited from that. Granted, we've had some good people come in and out of our life, both family and friends. Both of us have, which has helped reinforce the kind of life that we wanted to have and be. Thankfully, Mom and I have never had, goals or thoughts to be bigger than we could have ever accomplished anyways. I think there are some limitations that do occur, simply because we are humans, and there are limitations that we have imposed upon us, for whatever that might be, whether it's our fear, whether it's our own doing and being. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean I'm saying we should stop trying. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have to fail in order to learn and to make adjustments and to go on and to know what those limitations are. It's like anything else. My dad always told me, good that you have a decent head on your shoulder, because if I had to make a living with my hands, I wouldn't survive. Mm-hmm. And as funny as it is, and I laugh every time I say that, and when my dad made that comment to me, it is true, because even though I try to do things, it's just that aptitude is not there. Mm-hmm. Still like, I'm not allowed power tools because I can't cut straight lines. Mm-hmm. And and that's the way it is. And I can keep practicing, I guess, and keep practicing and practicing and practicing, but the outcome sometimes is still the same, because at times you just don't have the aptitude or the skills to do it, right?
Or you'll never be able to cut a straight line because you tell yourself you can't, so therefore you never will.
No.
You could change your thoughts about your ability to be handy and do those things, and I bet the outcomes would change. But anytime you pick up a power tool, if you think, well, I can't cut straight, then you're never going to cut straight. Yeah. I know that sounds really, really simple, but I think it's true. I think that you would be better with your hands if you believed you could be.
Yeah.
And I don't say that like I say I'm not good with my hands. I don't enjoy it, so I don't want to put in the work to get good, or I don't want to tell myself I'm good because I don't want to do it. But I think that, and I was going to say, you hit on it. If you didn't mention it, I was going to hit on it. But that, like you said, that thankfully you and Mom didn't have goals to be bigger than you could be. And like the first thing I thought about, that's such a limiting thought. Like, who knows how big you could be? Right. Like, who knows how big I can be? Like, right. I used to, so when I started this Authentic Life and the Spirit, Mind, Body movement and talk, Jay Shetty and Ramit Sethi were these two well-known individuals that are, sell millions of books, big podcasts, like really famous, if you will. And I used to say I wanted to occupy the space between them because Jay is more spiritual. He's the former monk. Ramit is more on the finance side, but neither one of them talks about the other subject. And there's this lane between the two of them that I want to occupy. And for the longest time, I said I want to be in that area between Jay and Ramit, but I don't care to get as big as them. And I don't have to set my goal to be as famous as them, but I also don't have to limit myself. So like I've stopped saying that. Like I want to own the space between Jay and Ramit. Wherever that is, that's fine, but I want to be in that space. If it is hundreds of millions of books being sold and big platform and, getting to interview people like Kobe and all these people that Jay Shetty did, then great. But if not, that's perfectly fine as well. So I think that maybe you could have been bigger if you didn't have that belief that you were as big as you could be. And big is relative. Like that doesn't mean you have to, but whatever big is, like you're never going to outgrow where you're at if you think that is the capacity that you have.
Right.
And we have the ability, because you can look at all these other people that you look at their resume and their history and their background, and there's no reason they should get that big, but they believed in themselves. Right. And because they believed in themselves, they were able to do it.
Right. No, I think that's spot on. And again, my comment about not getting bigger than we could have been, I think that is also meant to be. There's not a limitation, but there's a level of recognizing you've achieved a lot and you're very comfortable with what you've accomplished. And that's big enough because you don't know what's next. Growing up, saying, okay, I'm going to do more than go to work in a steel mill. Mm-hmm. Big decision, big life change. But it got us here, and it got us on a track that did accomplish a lot more, and we did get bigger than I ever thought we would be because of that. Mm-hmm. Now, again, there was a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice. We can go on forever. Those are side conversations. But that's my point of saying, okay, that is my statement of getting bigger than I thought. Just like living in the home that we've been in now for 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. That's bigger than I ever thought we would have. And in the neighborhood I never thought we would have, but we did accomplish it. Mm-hmm. But did I have desires to have more and give you and Mom more than that? Of course I did. The reality of it was it didn't come to be for different reasons, but the reality also of that comes to be is that now that I understand that more, I wouldn't want it to have been what I thought I wanted to have for lots of other reasons. Because had that gone that direction, a lot of the benefit and experiences that we had as a family, people that came across your path, that would have all been different and we wouldn't have known any better. So when I say never bigger than I wanted to be, that's my definition of what I meant by that statement. Mm-hmm. It's that it got us more than I ever thought, and each phase has brought us more, and each of those phases have brought different people into life that have been good for us, good for you and Kristen, generated where we needed to go. And yes, that's bigger than so that's why I say bigger than I ever thought. Yes, much like you, when I was going through those 40 years 40 decade of everything I was doing at work in the career was all about trying to get big, to be recognized in the industry, which I was. To be involved in making substantial changes in lives, which I did, including the industry. Mm-hmm. The work that we did on those committees, changed that industry, changed the insurance industry in the way that they processed. And the way they're doing it today is because of things we did in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I was a part of that. I led a lot of that. So that's what I mean, being bigger than I ever thought. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did I want to be there? Yes. At one point I wanted to go to work for an industry organization that was in New York City. Mm-hmm. Go to work in New York City, be all a part of that. Glad it never happened, because I would not have, I enjoy it, mm-hmm. but thinking about that, not limiting myself, but recognizing that really isn't who I wanted. Yes, I liked it at the time because I was, if you would, a visitor, going to meetings, mm-hmm. going to conferences, eating nice dinners in the big restaurants in New York, staying in great hotels. That was the New York I thought I wanted to be a part of, but then recognizing I couldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have been for us. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't have worked out. Mm-hmm. Same thing with wanting to be in San Francisco. That mm-hmm. wouldn't have worked out either, other than that. Move the camera. Okay, so to kind of keep us moving here, because you do have something coming up, and we got to be cautious of time.
Before you do, what you just described was not what I think initially came across with like the having bigger goals. Like when you said that, it made me feel like you kept your goals small because of lack of belief. But there was something later on, which doesn't sound like that's the case. But then you said being comfortable. And I think I don't think comfortable is good. I think content is good. And there's a difference between being content with the life that you have, realizing you have everything that you want, and comfortable being, well, I'm comfortable and I don't want to change because it might mess up what I have now, which is comfortable. I think being comfortable becomes complacency. And when you're complacent, I don't think you fully reach all that you're supposed to and all that you might want to. Being content, I believe that's more of a decision of, I know New York City is an option, but I don't want that because it would change these things. I'm content with being in Indiana for all these reasons. So like, to me, if you're content, I think you have less of a chance of having regret in the future. If you just want to be comfortable, then I think you look at missing out on life and taking risks because you didn't want to disrupt the comfort that you have. And I think that leads to having regrets in life. So I don't want to be comfortable. Like I don't want to intentionally make life discomfortable. I don't want to be in discomfort all the time. But if I ever found myself cruising, feeling comfortable, I would be nervous because then I don't think I'm going to keep on growing. And I also don't want to grow just for growth's sake. I want to grow in the ways that interest me. And that's why that's how I pursue all the things I want to do, because I have an interest in doing these things and I want to see what they're like. So I think being comfortable is a red flag. And if you want to shift your being comfortable to being content, then that's fine. But I think you have to really make a decision that I'm not choosing this life because it's comfortable. I'm choosing it because this is what I want. There's more out there I could go get, but I'm choosing not to because I know what I have now is what I want. And I know that they sound very similar, but there's a big enough difference between them that I think it can take your paths two different directions, and there's a big gap at the end of them. Yeah. One maintaining comfortability and another being content.
I think that's a very good discussion, Jay, and point. Although, for this episode, we'll just kind of say we'll agree to disagree a little bit, because I think for me and maybe others, that difference between being content and comfortable may not really be seen the way you described it. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion, there's been experts that probably examined this, but, my position would be there's nothing wrong with being comfortable if everything about your life, and here's where you're saying is content and comfort can be very similar, there's nothing wrong with that if everything about your life is in sync with what you want and have and what you're doing, and you're working hard, you're making those changes, you're adapting to the obstacles, and everything that comes about in life is that series of learning events and opportunities. And I think if you're happy with where you're at in life, and there's so much to be said about being happy where you are in life, I don't know that you say that I'm content or I'm comfortable or if it even matters. Because even though I'm happy now and comfortable now, who knows what will come along, because we don't know, right? We don't know beyond today. And I look at, those who've lived before us and how they turned obstacles into energy, which is, things that happen every day. You get obstacles and you turn those into energy and they take you down a different path. And you can still be comfortable doing that and not feel necessary to want to make shifts. And I think sometimes we're on autopilot. That's the other point too. I think that's happening, that I'm noticing. And not that I'm always comparing where I was to where I'm at now and where I need to be, because I'm trying so much in this phase of my life to not be on that autopilot, to be more forceful in recognizing the good of a day and taking whatever's in front of me and making that into something, even if it is just something that's going on in a workout, something that I feel coming out of a yoga session these days, something after reading a particular book. In the past, I may have just dismissed those as, okay, that was a passing thought, right, and move on. So along this line, I think we have to keep fighting to be the person we meant to be. And in your Monday daily note, so again, another plug for you, Justin's doing these daily notes, so he puts his thoughts out there.
People are going to quit listening if all you do is plug my stuff.
I'm not plugging,
I appreciate that.
But this is the segue I wanted to make, because your Monday was about being, becoming who you want to be. And it kind of talks a little bit. It's funny, again, you wrote this on Monday. I had this outline last week, and the both kind of come together because you talk about, just pointing yourself in the direction you believe your future's at and just letting it happen rather than, and I'm just paraphrasing it, you got to get out of your way, basically, is what you're saying, right? Get out of your way. And I think that's a key to what we need to do in this encore phase of our life too, is get out of our way. And remember, we're living a life that we can now because it's on our time, not doing what we need to do to get through our work day and meet schedules and project deliverables and other opportunities that we miss because of those things coming. So what I'm seeing and trying to keep us on track here is what I'm seeing is that we got to keep fighting to be who we want to be, even in this phase of our life. And I'm learning that that's a good exercise, not a negative exercise. But I'm saying it's not about the stop and go, right? It's not about stopping the one life that we learn by, because I don't think that ever stops, right? Because we're going to continue to learn and we're going to live that life along this parallel, and then live the life afterwards, because every time we learn something, it's going to be a new life, or we're going to go a different way. So I think I'm learning it's just about shifting gears. I'm trying to set my mentality now in this phase of life to be nothing more than like always shifting gears, staying in that world of the manual transmission, driving, along, and you're always shifting gears for different reasons. Slow down, speed up, prepare to take this kind of curve, come out of the curve this way to speed back up, and whatever. So the whole shifting gears is the state I'm trying to put myself into, and recognize that allows me to change, and to change the way I need to look at aging. I think it's important for us to look at how we age, just like it's important for you to look at how you age at this phase of your life and what you're going after. And at some point, we have to do that, or as you said, we have to just put it there for us, right? And let it just continue to focus on the activities that you enjoy the most. And then it'll happen to be at that time. And you have a lot more in here, but we're not going to have time to cover that. But I think we got to allow age not to change us, but change the way that we age. I think that's critical for us. And to rethink what being older is about, right? I think, I've always said that I didn't worry about age, and I still don't worry about age, but I also have to look at it and say, I do have to think about how I am at this age, because now just celebrating a birthday, I'm now just 2 years shy of 70, the 7 decade. It's like, holy crap, what's that going to be like? And it's interesting to say. I don't feel any different than I did even 10 years ago.
Then you shouldn't worry about it.
I'm not saying I'm worrying about it. I'm just saying it's just like, wow, here it is, the 7 decades. So to our point all along, we're going to be living a lot longer, and we got to change the way we age and think about how we age, because that's critical. And I think it's more about a sense of wonder and appreciation to everything that we've accomplished along the way, even those obstacles that we had placed along the way, whether we placed them there ourselves or they were placed there just by life itself. That's a critical moment in our time as well. But each of those are meant to be a learning experience. Mm-hmm. And I think those experiences is what help us continue to improve who we are, decide which direction we want to go, and stay on that path. Because I think now the path is the one that you create, because you have a lot of opportunity. I mean, honestly, Jay, there's more opportunity today for me to do things than there was when I was 40. Simply because obviously there's close to 30 years since that happened, and so much has happened in 30, and so much more is going to happen in 30, or even 10, if we're lucky. So I think, Jay, as we're getting here, I want to stay close to our time on this one, since you do have another appointment coming. I think that it's great to know what we've accomplished, and it's great to accept that we've had a lot of blessings in our life. But I think it's critical for us to understand that that we're blessed with this life, that it's our life. It's our life to live now. As I've always said, my life was always about living and making sure that Mom and you and Kristen were fine in the young years, through high school, college, staying in tune now with all of you and the grandkids. My parents, Denise's parents, all of what we got now is different because of who's left. So we have different things now to do and to build a different life because of those who are no longer with us that we always wanted, to be in our lives. And we don't control that part. But I still always think often how great it would be if we had, some of those people who are gone now still in our life, and to experience more of what we got. So I think we have to be understanding that we're blessed with a life. That's our life, right? And then just to remember that, never quit, never stop searching, and never quit seeking your greater purpose, right? So I think that's all I had for you today. I don't know if you got anything else to close out with or not, but...
No, I smirked earlier because you were talking about getting old, and I looked at the font on your paper. It's ginormous.
It's not ginormous. It's large enough since you don't have I couldn't use my teleprompter, so I wanted to try not to be with my readers, to give a better side on the camera rather than the readers. So it's to allow me to not worry about my readers.
The only thing I was the aging thing, I think an important part of like aging and getting older is not telling obviously there's things you have to change as you get older. Physically, you can't do all the things you did before, but also not telling yourself you have to change a whole lot because you're close to 70. Like, I think age really is a number, and I think your spirit and your soul makes you the age that you are. So you can be 70, but you can be youthful, and no one would guess you're 68, if they saw you. I think part of that is your spirit and your soul, and not telling yourself. So yes, you have to be careful. You have to think about maybe making some changes as you get older, but also not aging yourself because, now I'm 70, that means all these things. No, you can still remain youthful. Your spirit will keep you youthful and I think it'll help push some of those physical things out further. And I think that's more reason to take care of yourself at an earlier age. That was the big epiphany for me of taking care of myself for so long and then getting out of that habit, was that it'll be a lot easier for me to get back on track when I'm 40 than it would be when I'm 60. And all the things I'm doing today are for when I'm 65 and 70. And that version of me is going to be thankful that I'm doing all these things because I will be in good shape. I'll still have mobility from the yoga. I'll still have strength from lifting weights. So I might be 70, but you might think I'm 55 because of what I've done for myself. So I think that there is a taking care of your body, but I think there's also the taking care of your mind. And if you tell yourself you can't do things because you're getting older, then you will not do things and you will get older. Versus just because I'm 70, that doesn't mean that I all of a sudden have to change everything and can't do these things because I'm 70. Because who determines what a 70-year-old can do?
Yeah.
You do. So that's
Right.
one thing I was going to add.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, and I think that's summarizes where we needed to close today, because it is all about that one life and learning and experience, being appreciative of the experiences and loving. Steal the verse from the Temptation song, living the life I love to live.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it should all be about, and that's what I'm recognizing more and more as these days have gone by, and now I'm starting the third year, and it is about being appreciative of that, and never quit that searching and seeking and exploring to be who you need to be more of.
Mm-hmm.
We do that throughout our life. However, sometimes we have to hold back because we have other things dictating what that is to us.
Mm-hmm.
But now in this phase of our life, it is purely yours. You can do whatever you darn well want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you still have some schedules, You got grandkids, have grandkids schedules, You have kids, you got the kids schedule. So that all stays the same. But that's again, you choose to live those schedules, and
Mm-hmm.
you choose to be a part of those schedules, or you choose not to. One or the other isn't necessarily right or wrong or indifferent. We choose to live those schedules because, family is the key to who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, Castelli family is, that's the key of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And everything about it. And it just resonates from there, and, that is who we are and where we benefit from,
Mm-hmm.
and where we get to the next phase. So thanks, Jay, for meeting this afternoon. Thanks for allowing me and us to record in the new studio, even though it's not all together yet. But, this is great. I'm happy for you that you've got this next step up, and it's a good feeling. Good to be a part of it as well. So I appreciate that. So
We're looking forward to getting these back on the regular schedule.
yeah. So to all of you, again, thanks for stopping by and listening to these two go at it. Maybe one of these times we'll get into a little bit more of the little times that Jay didn't make some decisions and it kept him from being a certain way until he was much later in life. So, but it's enjoy seeing that as well. That an occasional basketball to the head didn't help change, but we're all right with that. Thanks, Jay. Thank you all for being with us. Appreciate it, and just keep on with your next episode.